Hey everyone, so today we're going to look at Figma's new prototyping and variable functionality. So what we're going to start off by doing is just building a lo-fi prototype here using the components that we've already built in our lessons. And then what we're going to do is explore the prototyping functionality itself, such as the preview mode that we have here. And then we're going to look at building a more functional prototype using our variables. So one where we can add a room and we can see that the number of rooms added increases, the number of rooms available decreases, and the total cost of those rooms increases. So we're going to look at adding our variables and some conditional logic as well to make that happen. Let's dive in. All right, so before we get started with the actual prototyping, we're going to build a lo-fi wireframe together. And the reason being is that a lot of the tutorials that you see out there, and even the ones that Figma produced, they're these big complex designs. And if you're a junior designer, you might not know how to recreate that design. So you're already starting off with a disadvantage because you're confused looking at it. You might not know how auto layout works. A number of different factors can play in there. Even if you're a senior designer and you're just wanting to learn about Figma's new features and functionality they released, such as the prototyping updates, you might not have time to recreate that design and you don't really know where to start off. So today we're going to go through and build a lo-fi wireframe together first, leveraging the components in all of the other lessons so that you have a foundation to experiment with Figma's new prototyping tool, which we'll get to in the next lesson. So let's get started. What we're going to do here is let's draw a new canvas, a new frame. So we're going to go with an iPhone 14, nice and big, and let's bring in some text. Let's just call this app home. We're going to make this to our heading large. And our text headings, again, always use your styling. Oops. And let's change this to maybe our heading medium. Actually, we'll go with our heading small and say demoing the prototype feature. There we go. Maybe we'll make this a little bit smaller just so it fits. Demoing the prototype, the new prototype, the new prototype features. All right, and we'll move this over even just a little bit slightly. Next, let's go ahead and bring in our skeleton. Bring this in here so it gives the appearance that there's some text on the page. One more, and now let's go ahead and bring in a button at the bottom. We'll go with our button with type. There we go. And let's place this at the bottom. Again, looks something relatively super rough. And what we're going to do is let's actually we'll keep it the same size. We'll put that just like that. Let's get rid of the icon right and the icon left. And we're going to change the label to explore more. All right, next what we're going to do is let's build out a sub-inner page. So let's maybe just bring in a picture. And I just found a picture online of Monaco because, of course, who doesn't want to be in Monaco? Let's drop the saturation on that. And let's add a icon button. Button icon. Let's make it rounded as if it looks like a back button. So I'm going to change the corner radius to 50. And we'll swap out the icon for an arrow. Oops. Clicked the wrong thing. Our arrow. Arrow back. There we go. Next, let's go ahead and add some text again. So let's add a number here, which will be the number 1. Let's set this to our heading large. And let's actually copy and paste it. Ooh, and of course, add your color styling as well. And we're going to go room. Maybe it's a hotel app. Text heading. Let's then select both our number and our room text, and let's add auto layout. And I'll show you why a little bit later on in this lesson, that we can't have them all as one. They do need to be separated out, and we would just use auto layout to adjust the spacing in between. We'll tighten this up a little bit more. Hug and hug. And let's make that gap back to 8 or so. That's looking good. And next we'll do the same. So let's go 5, and we'll make this nice and small. So maybe our heading extra small and available. Select both text headings. And now let's add some buttons. So we can just copy and paste the button that we have here. Let's add our icon left, or icon right, excuse me, and we'll change this to, let's say, add room. And next, let's change the type to our outline, and we're going to say remove room. We'll change the icon to a plus, or add. And for this one, we'll change it to a delete. A little garbage. I think that's fine. Again, this isn't perfect. This is really just for the purposes of this lesson. And we'll bring in a skeleton. And we'll get rid of this button. And now let's add one more bit of text. And we're just going to shift up this image. And let's set this to a $sign. This one to, let's say, 500. And let's add a label for maybe total cost. So the idea here is that you'll be able to add a room and remove a room. As you add a room, the number of rooms available will decrease, and it will adjust the total costs. So let's just go ahead and add our auto layout to our numbers. Make it hug and hug. If you haven't taken the auto layout course yet, now is a good time to do so. And we'll do the same down here as well. Actually, it's already added because we copied it from the one room. All right, so there we have the basic foundation of our app. Next, let's get started actually reviewing the prototype features that Figma launched at Config. So now that we've got our rough app, I just want to demo the actual prototyping preview functionality, which was just launched, and show how it differs from the current prototyping functionality that we're all used to. So let's begin prototyping. So let's make it so that this button goes to this page. And what would generally happen in the past is that, I'm actually just going to present this one, is when sharing with a stakeholder, a client, what would happen is I would click this button and then realize I never actually set that button to begin with. And even if I was just testing out the prototype myself, there'd be a lot of flipping back and forth between different tabs. But what's great now is when building, I have this preview functionality. So what I can do is, let's just move this off to the side, is I can play the prototype while looking at my designs and then realize, I didn't actually link that button. So then what I can do is adjust. So now that button works. So it's an absolute lifesaver for junior designers, senior designers, absolutely everyone when they're building apps, working on especially really, really complex prototypes. This is one of my favorite features and functionality that Figma dropped at Config. So with our mockup built, let's add our variables. So we're going to add a variable for the 1, a variable for the room, a variable for the 5, another one for available, and another one just for the number of total cost, because those are all the elements that are going to change, or have the potential to, at least. So here with nothing selected, I see I have local variables on the right-hand side. So let's click Open Variables and start adding our variables for each of those elements. So let's just zoom in here a little bit. So I can hit Create Variable, and I'm going to start off from left to right. So let's start off with a number variant for the number of rooms, or variable, excuse me, not variant. So let's add a number. We're going to call this room number and set the value to 1. Let's then add a string variable for the text of room. We're going to call this room label with the value of room. And let's do the same for the number of rooms available and the available label. So we're going to add a number for rooms available, set that to 5, and let's add a string variable for the available label. Available label, set that to available. Make sure I spelled right. And let's then add a number variant or variable, excuse me, for the total cost. And we're going to set that to 500. Amazing. So we've created our variables. Now let's assign our variables. So let's click in and select the one. And I see here next to our heading large, I have this apply variable button. So now let's just go ahead and apply all of the variables that we created to the related attribute or element. So this is our room number. This is our room label. This is our rooms available. Oops. This is our available label. And this is our total cost. So we've gone ahead and applied all those variables. Now let's set up the prototyping so that those variables can change. So with this button, let's hit the prototype and let's set a variable. Let's say our room number is equal to room number plus 1. So basically what we're doing is we're setting that when this button is clicked, this room number, an extra room is just added onto it. So let's go ahead and preview this functionality. So explore more, and I can add a room, and I can see that that number adjusts. But the problem is that room is singular, which works great if you only have one room, but what if you have multiple rooms? So what we need to have happen is that rooms room becomes rooms when 2 or more rooms are added on. So let's do another. So let's add a set variable. We want to have that so that the room label is equal to rooms. Oops. Room label is equal to rooms. String lateral, there we go. And let's try that out. And now I can then see that when one is added on, an extra one is added on, that it then becomes plural. So let's then have happen so that as a room is added on, this is decreased. So let's set another variable. So set a variable so that our rooms available equals to rooms available minus 1. And let's always check our work as we go. And I can see that that adjusts. And we know that this goes into the negative for now, but that some conditional logic comes into play there, and we'll touch upon that in a later lesson. Lastly, let's set it up so that the increments, every time you add a room, the total cost increases by 500. So we're going to add another set variable. Set variable so that the total costs is equal to total cost plus 500. Beautiful. So let's check this out. So add room, and I can see that the number of rooms increases, the number of rooms available decreases, and the total cost goes up. Amazing. So one other thing as well that I would like to highlight is that what's really great and what used to happen in the past is if you wanted to display a hover effect, what you'd actually do is you duplicate the page and then apply the hover effect to this page. So then every time a user's hovering over that button, the prototype would switch to a different page and then you'd switch back. But what's really, really good with the new Figma prototyping functionality launched at Config 2023 is that if I go into our button, I actually have the ability now to prototype our button so that, again, this is our main component button, so that when this is hovered, so let's change this to while hovering, that this button will actually change to our hover state in the prototype itself. So let's do a little demo of that. Let's go back to, where is it, where we go, prototyping. So let's then preview this, explore more, and I can see that that now changes with all the same functionality that we had before. So that's another little trick that was also added on, and perfect. So next, let's actually look at adding some conditional logic. So now that we have our variables established, let's add some conditional logic. And the first piece of conditional logic we're going to add is that when there are no more rooms available, this button will become disabled. So let's click on the button, and we're going to add a conditional that states that if the rooms available is equal to 0, that button is going to change to our disabled. And let's give that a quick try. There we go. And I can see that when there are no more rooms available, that button then turns to disabled. So next, what we want to do is add some conditional logic that states that when this is 0, that there are going to be no more rooms available, so no more rooms are going to be able to be added, and the total cost will stay the same as well. And also, I can keep clicking this, I see that the number of rooms available goes into the negative. What we want are the number of rooms available, and the total cost to stop at a certain point. So let's add some additional conditional logic. So let's go ahead here and add another conditional that says that if the number of rooms available is greater than 0, and we'll start with total cost, that the total cost will increase by 500, and only if it is greater than 0. So let's add the same for our number of rooms available in the room number, conditional logic that states that if the number of rooms available is greater than 0, and we can just drag in the number of rooms. Actually, we'll do the room number first. And the reason being is that when you're working with conditional logic, it works from the top down. And sometimes, especially in this early version, early release of this, I have noticed sometimes it is a little bit buggy. So hopefully they clear that up in future releases. So here we have our rooms available, our room number plus 1. We got our total cost plus 500. And let's add another conditional that if the number of rooms available is greater than 0, we'll bring in number of rooms available minus 1. So let's do a quick check. I think that looks good. So let's explore more. And there we go. However, one thing I did notice, and let's take a quick look at this, is that, so let's reset the prototype. So 1 room, 2 room, 3 room, 4 room, 5 room, 6 room. However, if you look, there's no more rooms available, but the user still has the ability to click this button before it turns disabled. So let's go take a quick look here and see where we went wrong. So rooms available, if it's equal to 0, let's put if it is less than negative. Let's maybe adjust it so it's not equal to 0 if it is less than 1, and that should fix it. So let's close this, open back up our prototype again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Interesting. So that still didn't change. Let's try that out. Let's see what went wrong here again. So let's maybe move the number of rooms available down to the bottom, and now we'll try that out. Yeah, there we go. So that's where it's really important to adjust the order of your conditional logic, because sometimes Figma, again, it's super buggy in this early state of Figma. The prototyping tool, at least. The new release is from Config 2023. So that's why if you think the conditional logic is set up, maybe just move around your conditional logic until you find that sweet spot where everything starts to work as planned. So there it is. You now have your conditional logic set up. However, you might be asking, what about the ability to remove a room? Maybe you added one too many rooms. Well, that is for you to try. Of course, that's why we put the button in there, is for you to try it out on your own. And as always, if you have any questions or concerns, feel free to let us know.